objection to this time an implementing act regarding recycled plastic content. And I give the floor to Jutta Paulus again. Ska Keller, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Jutta Paulus, once again, thank you for all the colleagues to working together on this. The issue we are faced with is nothing less than the future of plastic recycling. It's not about whether one likes or dislikes chemical recycling, but it is about the respective roles for mechanical recycling versus chemical recycling. And it's about the relevant legal framework for such a decision. Everyone agrees that mechanical recycling is preferable to chemical recycling. And everyone agrees that chemical recycling should only deal with the plastic waste that cannot be mechanically recycled to relevant standards. This is also what the Commission draft says in Recital 19. The problem is that the Commission's draft does the opposite. It does not enact this hierarchy in any way. To the contrary, it gives an unfair advantage to the least favorable chemical recycling technologies by a mass balance accounting. Based on the method proposed by the Commission, with an input of 5% pyrolysis oil, you could produce a polymer for which you could then claim 25% recycled content, a factor 5 increase by mere accounting. Such inflation of recycling figures by mass balance accounting is not possible for mechanical recycling. This is why the recycling industry is very concerned about the Commission's draft and supports our objection. And 90% of the plastic recyclers are SMEs. Now I want to address the relevant legal framework. The Commission argues that it's unlikely that chemical recyclers will use plastic waste as input that could go into mechanical recycling due to the lower processing costs of mechanical recyclers. Only to then say, and I quote, "We expect chemical recyclers to focus on plastic waste that is not attractive to mechanical recyclers such as plastic films, multi-layers, or dark plastics." Wait a second here. We are in the context of the Single-Use Plastic Directive, which only covers beverage bottles, nothing more. Those are not normally made of plastic films or multi-layers or dark plastics, right? So how does the Commission justify setting a method for recycled content under the SUPD for the chemical recycling of plastics that are not even under its scope? Such plastics, however, are clearly relevant in the context of the packaging legislation. That would be the right legal framework to adopt a calculation method. All the more that the Commission intends to change the scope to allow also plastic waste from third countries to account for recycled content. This change of scope was done in the packaging legislation, but it was counterbalanced with a certification of equivalence and the establishment of sustainability criteria to avoid that recycling in the EU gets out-competed by recycling at lower standards in third countries. This was the most difficult point during the negotiations, and the counterbalancing is a key achievement of the European Parliament. It is key to respect that. In our view, it is clearly unacceptable for the Commission to establish a method under the mini-law on single-use plastics for the chemical recycling at large of products that are not under its scope, inconsistent with the provisions of the PPWR and thereby setting an undue precedent. An appropriate method for chemical recycling should be adopted under the PPWR, fully respecting the provisions thereof and effectively implementing the priority for mechanical recycling. I therefore ask you to please support this objection. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to EPP, Pernille Weiss.
Yes, but you have to imagine me as Peter Liese, because I have a statement on behalf of Peter Liese. Chemical recycling can be a complementary technology to the mechanical recycling of plastics. With this implementation decision, the Commission is supplementing the Single-Use Plastics Directive with a calculation method for recycled plastic content in PET bottles accordingly. We do have sympathy to some of the points raised by Jutta Paulus. It is true that the technology is still very in the beginning and has disadvantages compared with mechanical recycling with regards to the environment. It is more energy intensive and brings less yields. However, Chemical recycling can be used where mechanical recycling reaches its limits. It can be a solution to recycle plastic waste that has been polluted, for example, and would be burned or landfilled otherwise. By this, it can strengthen our circular economy. Therefore, we appreciate the Commission's intention to review the technological developments in the recycling sector. We also agree that the proposed fuel-excluded mass balance method for the time being. However, this agreement is combined with the understanding that mechanical recycling must still be prioritized in the waste hierarchy. On behalf of Peter Liese, thank you so much.
Thank you. So we move to Dela Burkhardt just on time, Dela.
Yes, thank you so much. I will speak German. Wir haben ja mit der
So, with the single-use plastic regulation, we set out requirements for minimum recycled plastic content in plastic bottles, and the aim was to establish incentives to use materials for longer, more frequently, rather than new plastic. Since that time, we have had quite good business done with recycled plastic, and a lot of people now want a piece of the cake. And then we had the draft of this implementing decision, which will have cheered up some people. The most dirty form of chemical recycling is now to be accepted, and even where there is a low recycled content, it will still be counted. And with the fuel use excluded, there is a very creative form of accounting, taking into account the various different techniques for recycling. We don't have the right requirements in this proposal, and here we are going to become very dependent. We would have companies that would be using this delegated act and creating facts on the ground that would be difficult to reverse. The Commission should now take the time to developing an implementing decision which is in line with the new criteria in the regulation. A new implementing decision would also allow chemical recycling, but hopefully would also provide a higher level of environmental protection.
Thank you. We move to Frédéric Ries for Renew.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis souvent d'accord avec you.
Thank you. Well, I often agree with Jutta Paulus, as I did with the previous point on nanomaterials and on other issues. But here I would say that I would oppose this for quite a simple reason, and that is that I think the Commission proposal is actually quite balanced. This text is in line with what has been proposed in the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which I'm very familiar with because I was the rapporteur for it. So we have the principle in place that there should be rules about how we go about calculating the recycled plastic content. And it's very important to be clear about this. We're only looking here at bottles, single-use plastic bottles. So there is a difference of view here with the Greens. But I don't think that this implementing decision would preempt the calculation method that should then be used when it comes to the plastic waste regulation, which I think is to be voted through on Wednesday in Strasbourg. Coming on to the substance, the content, the Commission draft would cover all recycling techniques, including chemical recycling. I know that there are limits on chemical recycling, but I think that's right, because there's nothing in the Single-Use Plastics Directive which says that you have to use mechanical recycling. When I was negotiating that text towards the end of 2019, sorry, the beginning of 2019, we were well aware of the limits on mechanical recycling. It wouldn't enable a closed cycle form of recycling from bottle to bottle when it comes to perishable bottles, milk, for example, and fruit juices. I'd also like to add in conclusion that we also need to evaluate the economic impact of the decisions that we make. A lot of investments are being made at the moment in recycling in a whole series of member states: Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Belgium, Spain, Poland, just to mention some of them. Europe needs to do everything it can to boost innovation, and we should ensure that we're on the right road to achieving a circular economy, which is what we all want to achieve. To do that, we're going to need to use all the available technologies. And if I just have a few seconds left, Chairman, this is a little bit like the final week for a lot of things. And you mentioned that this is the last Environment and Health Committee meeting. And for me, this will be my last ever contribution in the Environment and Health Committee. So I'd just like to take a few seconds to say thank you. I would like to thank all of my colleagues. I assume we don't have so many colleagues here, but thank you very much for coming along. It's symbolic for the time being. And thank you to all of the advisors, assistants and staff, to all of the interpreters for 25 years, in my case, of campaigning almost unbroken. And above and beyond, so we have 3 members, yes, above and beyond our different political differences, we're all fighting for a better Europe. So thank you to all of you.
Merci, Frédéric.
Thank you, Frédéric.
Actually, it applies also to a lot of you. It's same for you, Ska, I guess. Same for you. I will come back to Niels, of course, too. For Sylvia as well. It was your last. It is your last meeting. And to Niels as well. And Pernieu was also concerned. So, of course, we will discuss this in a more informal manner in the drink. We have just after the meeting organized kindly by Sarah and her team. So we come back to this objection. And I don't have any speaker for ECR, ID, and the left. So I open the catch the eye. No speaker. Okay, so I move to the Commission from DG ENVI, Aurel Subianou-Dordea.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to call upon the members of this committee and of the European Parliament to vote against this motion for a number of reasons, which I will explain briefly here. First, the proposal from the Commission stays within the mandate which is clearly given by the Single-Use Plastics Directive and is meant to take into account a technology which is already functioning on the market and which is indispensable because it deals with materials that mechanical recycling cannot deal with. Then the rules that we are proposing are strict and do not allow creative accounting, and they are neutrally technological, not tilting the balance in favor of chemical recycling more than in favor of mechanical recycling. And because the act that we are proposing is having a limited scope, strictly respecting the perimeter defined by the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and the review of the rules we are proposing now will be possible, and an expansion of the scope under the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation at a later stage. Therefore, the Single-Use Plastics Directive constitutes a testing ground for how this will work, and we will keep this under close supervision. Finally, an argument in favor of enacting these rules now is that there is a growing demand for recycled content. We have these obligations not only under the Single-Use Plastics Directive. We will have mandatory recycled content obligations under the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. We have proposed mandatory recycled content for the automotive sector, not only for personal cars, but for the entire range of automotive. And in the future, we intend to bring these mandatory recycled content obligations also for the textile sectors. So there is a growing need, and we need indeed to be open in order to create all the necessary tools for circular economy to operate in this area. So I would like to insist in detail on the fact that the mechanical recycling works only for PET bottles, but mechanical recycling cannot deliver for other beverage bottles and for other food contact applications in the future that use other feedstock than PET. So we need chemical recycling. I would like to insist on the fact that the rules that we are proposing do not create an inflation of recycled content, contrary to what has been said here. The calculation of chemical recycled plastic content requires mass balance accounting. This method balances the inputs of the process with its outputs. The draft rules would prevent creative accounting, meaning that the losses generated in the process and the material outputs that are going to be used as fuels cannot be qualified as recycled content, thus complying with the definition of recycling already given by the Waste Framework Directive. So thank you very much for your attention, and we hope that this motion will be rejected.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think things are clear. So we will vote in a few minutes in ENVI, and if adopted, we will move to Strasbourg next week, the objection. We move to the next agenda item, which is the the simplification, if we could discuss this point, of the CAP. We will have first